Introduction. In the heart of the Philippine archipelago, amidst the verdant embrace of mountains and the whisper of ancient forests, lived the Aeta, an indigenous people whose history is as rich and complex as the land they call home. Often marginalized and misunderstood, their story is one of profound resilience, deep spiritual connection to nature, and an enduring struggle for identity and survival in a rapidly changing world. This book embarks on a journey to unveil the untold history of the Aeta, tracing their origins from the earliest migrations out of Africa to their contemporary fight for land, recognition, and cultural preservation. For millennia, the Aeta have thrived as guardians of the Philippine wilderness, their lives intricately woven with the rhythms of the earth. They are among the oldest inhabitants of the islands, predating the arrival of later Austronesian settlers by tens of thousands of years. Their unique physical features, diverse languages, and animistic spiritual practices set them apart, marking them as a distinct and vital thread in the tapestry of human history. Yet, despite their deep roots and invaluable contributions, the Aeta have largely remained on the periphery of national narratives, their voices often silenced, their heritage obscured by misconception and neglect. This exploration delves into the multifaceted aspects of Aeta life, beginning with their ancient origins and the fascinating migrations that brought them to these shores. We will examine the scientific evidence, archaeological findings, and genetic studies that illuminate their ancestral journey and their relationship to other Negrito populations across Southeast Asia. From there, we transition into the heart of their traditional lifeways, exploring their spiritual cosmology, their masterful understanding of sustainable living through foraging and hunting, and the intricate social structures that bind their communities. Discover the wisdom embedded in their oral traditions, the beauty of their artistic expressions, and the profound harmony they maintain with their natural environment for countless generations. However, the Aeta's history is not solely one of pristine tradition. It is also a powerful testament to struggle and survival in the face of relentless external pressures. We will navigate the dramatic shifts brought about by the arrival of Austronesian settlers, the imposition of Spanish colonialism, and the subsequent impacts of American rule in World War II. Perhaps no single event encapsulates their profound challenges more vividly than the catastrophic 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo, which, while devastating, also showcased their extraordinary capacity for resilience and adaptation. Finally, this book illuminates the ongoing fight for recognition and revival. It explores the legal battles for ancestral domain, the challenges of cultural erosion in the modern era, and the vital role of education in empowering new generations of Aeta leaders and advocates. We will witness how, against immense odds, the Aeta are redefining their identity in the 21st century, leveraging art, activism, and alliances to ensure their living legacy endures. Through this comprehensive narrative, we aim to not only honor the Aeta's past, but also to amplify their present struggles and future aspirations. Their story is a powerful reminder of the urgency of protecting indigenous cultures, fostering environmental stewardship, and championing human dignity. Join us as we uncover the untold history of the Aeta, inviting you to see them not as a people of the past, but as a dynamic and enduring presence, a living legacy from whom we have much to learn. Chapter 1. Before the Philippines, the First Migrations. The story of the Aeta, the indigenous people who are among the earliest inhabitants of the Philippine archipelago, does not begin with the islands themselves. It starts much further back, in the cradle of humanity, on the continent of Africa. Their journey across continents and seas represents one of the most astonishing sagas of human dispersal, a testament to early humanity's ingenuity, adaptability, and insatiable drive to explore. To truly understand the Aeta, we must first trace the pathways of their ancestors, following the faint, yet increasingly clear scientific breadcrumbs left across the vast expanse of time. Modern scientific consensus, buttressed by an ever-growing body of genetic and archaeological evidence, points to a single origin for all Homo sapiens, East Africa. From this ancestral homeland, waves of migrations began, pushing humanity across the globe. One of the most pivotal of these events, particularly for the populations of Asia and Oceania, was the out-of-Africa migration that occurred roughly 70,000 to 60,000 years ago. This was not a single mass exodus, but rather a series of movements, likely following coastal routes, as early humans, equipped with nascent maritime skills, followed abundant marine resources. These early voyagers, hunter-gatherers by necessity, navigated coastlines, crossed narrow straits, and adapted to diverse ecosystems. Their journey would have taken them along the southern coast of Asia, through the Arabian Peninsula, across the Indian subcontinent, and eventually into Southeast Asia. The world they encountered was dramatically different from today. During the last glacial maximum, LGM, much of the Earth's water was locked in massive ice sheets, leading to significantly lower sea levels. This exposed vast land bridges, particularly in Southeast Asia, creating the landmass known as Sunda. What are now separate islands were often connected, making the journey across what we now call the Malay Peninsula, Sumatra, Borneo, and Java far more achievable, though still incredibly challenging. These pioneers were not just survivors, they were innovators. They developed sophisticated tools from stone, bone, and wood, honed their hunting and gathering techniques, and began to understand the subtle cues of their environment. Their journey was driven by a complex interplay of factors: population pressure, the search for new resources, climatic shifts, and perhaps simply an innate human curiosity to see what lay beyond the next horizon. As these early migrations pushed eastward, they eventually reached the fringes of what would become the Philippine archipelago. The term Negrito is used to describe several geographically dispersed indigenous populations in Southeast Asia who share certain physical characteristics, notably dark skin pigmentation, and often, but not always, relatively short stature and distinctive hair textures. These populations are considered direct descendants of the earliest out-of-Africa migrants to reach the region, distinct from later waves of Austronesian-speaking peoples. The precise timing and roots of the Negrito group's arrival in the Philippines remain subjects of ongoing scientific debate, but current evidence suggests they reached the islands between 50,000 and 25,000 years ago. Their arrival would have been facilitated by the lower sea levels of the glacial periods, which would have connected what are now individual islands into larger landmasses, or reduced the distances between them to manageable crossings for early watercraft. The archipelago, even then, was a mosaic of diverse environments: dense rainforests, fertile lowlands, and towering volcanic mountains, offering a wealth of resources for skilled hunter-gatherers. It is crucial to understand that Negrito is a broad umbrella term, and the groups within the Philippines, the Aeta, Ati, Mamanwa, Batak, Agta, and others, represent distinct ethno-linguistic communities, each with their own unique history, language, and cultural practices. However, they share a deep genetic lineage that connects them to these earliest waves of settlement in Southeast Asia. Their presence in the Philippines marks them as the original custodians of these islands, long before the emergence of what we now recognize as Filipino national identity. The Aeta are not an isolated phenomenon. They are part of a broader, fascinating story of Negrito populations scattered across Southeast Asia, from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. Understanding these parallels helps us to appreciate the Aeta's place within a larger human tapestry and to identify shared ancient legacies. Among the most well-known are the Andamanese of India's Andaman Islands, the Semang of the Malay Peninsula, including groups like the Batek and Jahai, and the Mani of Thailand. While geographically separated and culturally distinct today, genetic studies show a deep ancestral connection between these groups. They represent the surviving descendants of the initial out-of-Africa expansion along the southern coastal route. Despite varying environmental adaptations and subsequent interactions with later migrating populations, these Negrito groups share remarkable similarities that hint at a common ancient heritage. These include traditional reliance on hunting, foraging, and fishing, a profound animistic worldview that reveres nature spirits, and in many cases, a historical experience of being pushed into more remote, less accessible territories by more agriculturally advanced incoming populations. For instance, the Batek of Malaysia, like some Aeta groups, are known for their intricate knowledge of forest resources and their semi-nomadic lifestyle. The Andamanese, isolated for millennia, offer a unique glimpse into the very early stages of human culture and language, having diverged genetically from mainland populations far earlier than most. Comparing the Aeta to these relatives highlights a common resilience and adaptability. It also underscores the diverse pathways of human evolution and cultural development, reminding us that there is no single primitive or advanced stage of human society. Rather, each group has developed unique strategies for flourishing within their environment. The narrative of the Aeta's deep antiquity in the Philippines is not merely anecdotal or based on oral traditions, though these are invaluable sources. It is increasingly substantiated by robust scientific evidence from the fields of archaeology and genetics. Archaeological evidence provides tangible proof of early human presence. Key sites across the Philippines have yielded significant findings. The discovery of Calao Man in 2007, later re-evaluated as Homo luzonensis, in Calao Cave, Cagayan, pushed back the timeline of hominin presence in Luzon to at least 67,000 years ago. While Homo luzonensis is not Homo sapiens, its existence demonstrates that early hominins were capable of reaching these islands very early, paving the way for later modern human migrations. The discovery of Tabon Man in 1962 in the Tabon Cave Complex, Palawan, representing Homo sapiens, remains dated to approximately 47,000 years ago, provided the earliest conclusive evidence of modern humans in the Philippines. Tools and other artifacts found alongside these remains suggest sophisticated hunting and foraging strategies. Numerous other sites across the archipelago, including those in Mindanao and Luzon, have yielded stone tools, shell middens, and other archaeological features dating back tens of thousands of years, consistent with a long-term presence of hunter-gatherer populations. These artifacts, often simpler flake tools, are characteristic of the early Upper Paleolithic period. Genetic evidence, particularly from studies of mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, and Y chromosomes, offers compelling support for the deep lineage of Negrito groups in the Philippines and their connection to the initial out-of-Africa migrations. Studies of Aeta and other Philippine Negrito groups reveal the presence of ancient, deeply divergent haplogroups, genetic markers, that split off from other human populations very early in the out-of-Africa journey, indicating deep basal lineages. These lineages are distinct from those in later Austronesian populations, confirming their separate and much older migratory history. Molecular clock analyses, which estimate the time when two populations last shared a common ancestor, place the divergence of Philippine Negrito populations from other Asian groups tens of thousands of years ago, consistent with the archaeological findings for early human settlement. While there has been some genetic admixture with later Austronesian populations, particularly in recent centuries, studies show that many Aeta communities retain a significant proportion of their ancestral genetic makeup, reinforcing their unique genetic identity as descendants of the first wave of migrants. In essence, both the spade of the archaeologist and the microscope of the geneticist paint a consistent picture. The ancestors of the Aeta were among the earliest brave explorers who ventured into the vast expanse of Southeast Asia. They reached the Philippine archipelago not merely as transient visitors, but as enduring settlers, laying the foundation for a vibrant and resilient culture that would adapt, survive, and thrive for tens of thousands of years on these islands. Their story is not just a footnote in Philippine history, it is its very first chapter. Chapter 2. Who are the Aeta? Having journeyed back tens of thousands of years to trace the ancient migrations that brought humanity to the Philippine archipelago, we now turn our attention to the specific people at the heart of this book, the Aeta. While Chapter 1 introduced the broader concept of Negrito populations as the earliest inhabitants, this chapter seeks to define and understand the Aeta themselves, exploring their unique characteristics, dispelling common misconceptions, and contextualizing their identity within the complex fabric of Filipino society. Defining the Aeta within the constellation of Negrito populations in the Philippines requires careful nuance. The term Negrito, as discussed, is a broad classification for various indigenous groups across Southeast Asia who share certain phenotypical traits and a deep ancestral lineage. In the Philippines alone, this umbrella term encompasses numerous ethno-linguistic groups including the Ati of Panay and Negros, the Mamanwa of Mindanao, the Batak of Palawan, and various groups often referred to broadly as Agta and Dumagat in Luzon. The Aeta, specifically, are predominantly found in the central and northern parts of Luzon, particularly in the provinces of Zambales, Pampanga, Bataan, Tarlac, and Aurora. While they share a common ancestral heritage with other Philippine Negrito groups, each Aeta community possesses its own distinct dialects, customs, and local identities, making a monolithic definition challenging. They are not a single, undifferentiated group, but rather a collection of related, yet diverse communities, bound by shared ancient roots, and often, a similar historical experience of marginalization. Physically, the Aeta are often characterized by their dark brown to black skin pigmentation, which ranges from a deep ebony to a lighter shade, often attributed to their long history of tropical sun exposure. Their hair typically ranges from tightly curled to wavy, and a significant number exhibit natural blonde or reddish hair, a trait found in some indigenous populations in Oceania and believed to be an ancient, independent mutation. Stature varies, though many Aeta groups are of relatively short height, a feature shared with other Negrito populations. Facial features can include broader noses and fuller lips, contributing to a distinctive appearance that sets them apart from the majority Austronesian-descended Filipino population. Their languages, while distinct, generally belong to the Philippine branch of the Austronesian language family, a testament to long-standing interaction and, in some cases, language shift from earlier, possibly now extinct, pre-Austronesian languages. Each Aeta community often speaks its own unique dialect, such as Ambala, Maganchi, Magbekan, or Abilin, reflecting their localized histories and often limited intergroup contact until more recent times. Beyond physical and linguistic traits, cultural markers are crucial to their identity. These include a profound spiritual connection to the natural world, often expressed through animistic beliefs and reverence for nature spirits, traditional practices of hunting, foraging, and fishing as primary modes of subsistence, and intricate knowledge of medicinal plants and forest ecology. Their artistic expressions, from body tattooing to unique musical instruments and weaving, further distinguish them. Unfortunately, the Aeta, like many indigenous peoples globally, have long been subjected to pervasive misconceptions and racial stereotypes, which have deeply impacted their interactions with wider Filipino society. Historically, they were often depicted in derogatory terms by colonial powers, and even by some lowland Filipinos, portrayed as primitive, backward, or uncivilized. Their nomadic or semi-nomadic lifestyles, their traditional attire, and their distinct physical features were frequently misinterpreted as signs of inferiority rather than adaptations to their environment and unique cultural expressions. During the Spanish colonial period, they were often viewed as fierce, intractable heathens, living beyond the reach of colonial control, leading to campaigns of forced resettlement and conversion. American colonial policies, while aiming for civilization through education, often perpetuated stereotypes by showcasing them as ethnographic curiosities and world fairs, further dehumanizing them. In contemporary Philippine society, lingering stereotypes persist, contributing to discrimination, social exclusion, and economic disadvantage. They are sometimes exoticized or romanticized in superficial ways, but rarely are their complex histories, vibrant cultures, and ongoing struggles genuinely understood or respected. These stereotypes, whether overtly malicious or subtly patronizing, undermine their dignity and impede their full integration into national life on their own terms. This brings us to the profound significance of the term indigenous in Filipino society and for the Aeta themselves. To be indigenous means to be the original inhabitants, with a deep, unbroken connection to ancestral lands and cultural practices that predate colonial conquest and the formation of modern nation-states. For the Aeta, their indigeneity is not merely a historical footnote. It is the cornerstone of their identity, their rights, and their continued existence. The concept of indigenous carries with it inherent rights under international law, including the right to self-determination, the right to ancestral domains, and the right to cultural preservation. In the Philippines, the passage of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, IPRA of 1997, was a landmark legislative effort to recognize and protect these rights. For the Aeta, this law, despite its imperfections and challenges in implementation, provides a legal framework to reclaim ancestral lands, protect traditional knowledge, and assert their place as rightful stakeholders in the nation's future. Their identity as indigenous people challenges the dominant narratives of Philippine history, which often prioritize the narratives of lowland, Christianized Filipinos. By asserting their indigeneity, the Aeta affirm their distinct historical experience, their unique cultural contributions, and their moral claim to land and resources that have sustained them for millennia. It is a powerful declaration of continuity, resilience, and a demand for respect and recognition within the diverse mosaic of the Filipino nation. Chapter 3. The Aeta across Luzon. The Aeta are not a monolithic group confined to a single geographical pocket. Rather, they are a diverse people whose communities are scattered across a significant portion of the largest island in the Philippines, Luzon. To understand the Aeta is to understand their connection to this varied landscape, a connection that has shaped their distinct cultures, languages, and ways of life. This chapter ventures into the heart of their traditional territories, mapping their presence and exploring the fascinating regional variations that define their identity. The primary concentrations of Aeta communities are found within the central and western parts of Luzon, specifically across the provinces of Zambales, Pampanga, Bataan, Tarlac, and Aurora. Each province, while geographically adjacent, presents distinct ecological features that have influenced the Aeta who inhabit them. In Zambales, particularly in the mountainous regions surrounding Mount Pinatubo, reside groups like the Aeta Mag-Anchi and Aeta Magbeken. Their ancestral lands stretch from the volcanic slopes down to the coastal foothills, where they once traversed vast forests. To their east, in Pampanga and Tarlac, live other Aeta groups, often sharing historical and cultural ties with their Zambales kin, though facing more intense pressures from agricultural expansion and urban development in the Central Plains. In Bataan, the Aeta are found in the more rugged, forested areas of the Bataan Peninsula, maintaining a connection to the dense woodlands and coastal resources. Further northeast, stretching into the Sierra Madre mountain range, lies Aurora Province, home to the Agta and Dumagat Aeta, who traditionally roam the extensive rainforests and coastal areas, their lives intertwined with the rich biodiversity of that region. This distribution illustrates a people dispersed yet deeply rooted, each community adapting to the specific contours of their ancestral domain. Within this geographical spread lies a rich tapestry of regional variations in dialect, dress, and lifestyle. While sharing a common Negrito heritage, centuries of adaptation and varying degrees of interaction with lowland populations have fostered unique cultural expressions among different Aeta groups. The dialects spoken, for instance, are not uniform. An Aeta from the Zambales Mountains might speak Ambala, Maganchi, or Magbeken, while an Agta from Aurora might speak an entirely different Agta dialect, such as Casiguran Agta or Dicamay Agta. Though these are all broadly classified within the Philippine branch of Austronesian languages, the mutual intelligibility between them can be limited, highlighting distinct linguistic evolutions. Lifestyle, too, varies considerably. Traditionally, many Aeta groups were semi-nomadic, moving within their ancestral territories in search of food resources. However, the degree of nomadism and later sedentarization differed. Those in remote mountain ranges, like some Aeta groups in the Sierra Madre, maintained more traditional hunting and gathering practices for longer, while those closer to lowland settlements in Pampanga or Tarlac often engaged in more settled agriculture, laboring for wages, or trading forest products. Dress historically was minimal, often consisting of loincloths made from bark cloth, though distinct weaving patterns and adornments like beadwork or plant fiber accessories would have varied regionally. Body scarification and intricate tattooing, often specific to gender, age, and spiritual significance, also showed regional styles and patterns. These variations are not mere superficial differences. They represent the ingenious ways in which Aeta communities crafted distinct identities while living in relative isolation from one another for generations. The intrinsic relationship between the Aeta and their natural environments, the towering mountains, dense forests, and winding rivers, is perhaps the most defining aspect of their traditional lifeways. The mountains, particularly the Zambales mountain range dominated by Mount Pinatubo, have historically provided a refuge, a source of spiritual significance, and a bounty of resources. Here, the Aeta developed unparalleled skills in navigating rugged terrain, identifying edible plants and medicinal herbs, and tracking game. The forests, whether the lowland rainforests or the higher elevation montane forests, were their supermarkets, pharmacies, and homes. Their deep ecological knowledge, passed down through generations, allowed them to sustainably harvest wild yams, fruits, honey, and a variety of game. They understood the seasonal cycles, the behavior of animals, and the intricate web of life within the forest ecosystem. The rivers served as vital arteries, providing fresh water, fish, and pathways for travel. Aeta groups living near rivers or coastal areas were often skilled fishermen, utilizing traditional traps, spears, and nets. This profound interaction with their natural surroundings fostered a deep reverence for the land and its resources. Their traditional beliefs often centered around spirits inhabiting specific trees, rocks, or bodies of water, reinforcing a symbiotic relationship where nature was not just a resource to be exploited, but a living entity to be respected and communed with. It is this intimate connection to the mountains, forests, and rivers of Luzon that has sustained the Aeta for millennia and continues to define their identity, even as these environments face increasing threats from external pressures. Chapter 4. Genetic and Linguistic Legacy. The journey into the Aeta's past gains remarkable clarity through the lenses of science and cultural preservation, specifically through the study of their DNA and the intricate patterns of their languages and oral traditions. While archaeology offers snapshots of their ancient presence, genetic and linguistic studies provide a dynamic narrative of their deep history, their interactions with successive waves of migrants, and the enduring uniqueness of their cultural inheritance. This chapter delves into the scientific revelations that underscore the Aeta's position as one of the Philippines' most ancient inhabitants, and explores the profound significance of their spoken words and ancestral stories. Genetic insights, a deep ancestral root. Genetic studies on Aeta DNA have profoundly reshaped our understanding of early human settlement in the Philippines and the broader Southeast Asian region. These analyses, primarily focusing on mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA, passed down through the maternal line, and Y chromosome DNA passed through the paternal line, revealed that Aeta populations harbor some of the deepest and most divergent human genetic lineages found in the Philippines. These ancient haplogroups are consistent with the out-of-Africa migration wave that swept across Asia tens of thousands of years ago, setting the Aeta apart from the much later arrivals, the Austronesian settlers. The Austronesian expansion, beginning roughly 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, brought people with distinct genetic markers, agricultural practices, and seafaring technologies, who would eventually populate much of island Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Crucially, genetic comparisons show a clear and significant divergence between Aeta DNA and that of the dominant Austronesian-speaking Filipino populations. This genetic distinction provides compelling scientific evidence that the Aeta are direct descendants of the earliest modern humans to reach the archipelago, predating the vast majority of Filipinos by millennia. Their genetic blueprint is a living testament to a continuous, deep-rooted presence on these islands. However, the genetic narrative is not one of complete isolation. Over millennia, as Austronesian settlers spread across the islands, interactions with the indigenous Aeta were inevitable. These interactions, driven by trade, occasional conflict, and sometimes intermarriage, led to varying degrees of genetic admixture with later settlers. The impact of this admixture is evident in the genetic profiles of contemporary Aeta communities. While many groups retain a high proportion of their ancient ancestral markers, others, particularly those living in closer proximity to lowland settlements or engaged in more frequent interactions, show detectable genetic contributions from Austronesian populations. This admixture is not uniform across all Aeta groups. It varies significantly depending on geographical location, historical patterns of contact, and social dynamics. For example, some isolated mountain communities may exhibit less admixture than those in more accessible areas. This genetic blending reflects a complex history of coexistence and cultural exchange, demonstrating that identities are rarely static but are shaped by a dynamic interplay of heritage and interaction. Nevertheless, even with admixture, the fundamental genetic distinctiveness of the Aeta, as descendants of the earliest arrivals, remains a powerful and enduring signature in their DNA. Linguistic tapestry, language shift, and dialectal diversity. The linguistic landscape of the Aeta is equally fascinating and complex, mirroring their genetic history. While the Aeta are recognized as the aboriginal inhabitants of the Philippines, their languages are, perhaps surprisingly, largely classified within the Philippine branch of the Austronesian language family. This phenomenon is known as language shift, where an indigenous population adopts the language of a dominant incoming group while retaining their distinct ethnic identity and, often, some unique vocabulary or linguistic features from their original tongue. This suggests a long history of interaction and linguistic influence from the more numerous Austronesian speakers who arrived later. Within this broad classification, however, there exists a vibrant array of Aeta dialects, each specific to particular communities and regions. Examples include Ambala, Mag-Anchi, Magbekan, and Abalin in Zambales and Pampanga, various Agta dialects such as Kasigur and Agta and Umare Dumague in Aurora, and Batak and Ati languages in Palawan and the Visayas respectively, which are distinct but share ancient Negrito roots. These dialects often share basic vocabulary and grammatical structures with other Philippine languages, but possess unique phonological features, specialized lexicon relating to forest ecology, and sometimes subtle syntactic differences that hint at their pre-Austronesian linguistic substrate. The study of these dialects provides valuable insights into the historical movements and interactions of peoples within the archipelago, and underscores the Aeta's long-standing connection to the evolving linguistic tapestry of the Philippines. Oral traditions, living archives of culture. Perhaps one of the most profound aspects of the Aeta's cultural legacy, especially in the absence of a written script until relatively recently, lies in their rich oral traditions. For generations, stories, myths, legends, and historical accounts have been passed down verbally from elders to younger generations, serving as an alternative, yet equally powerful form of literacy. These oral traditions encapsulate their cosmology, their moral codes, their understanding of the natural world, and their collective memory. Creation myths explain the origins of the earth and humanity. Animal tales convey wisdom and moral lessons. Heroic narratives recount the deeds of ancestors and the struggles of their people, and ancestral epics chronicle the movements and significant events in their communities' histories. The act of storytelling is not merely entertainment. It is a vital pedagogical tool, a communal ritual, and a living archive. It reinforces social cohesion, transmits essential knowledge about survival and ethical conduct, and connects the present generation directly to their forebears. For the Aeta, the spoken word is paramount. It is the vessel through which their identity is reaffirmed, their values are instilled, and their heritage is preserved. In a world that often equates literacy solely with written text, the Aeta's oral traditions stand as a powerful reminder of the diverse and equally valid ways in which human knowledge, history, and culture can be recorded and kept alive, ensuring a living legacy that transcends the confines of the printed page. Chapter 5. A World in Harmony, Spirituality and Animism. To truly comprehend the traditional lifeways of the Aeta, one must delve into the very core of their being, their profound spiritual connection to the world around them. For generations, long before the arrival of foreign religions, the Aeta lived within a cosmology where the seen and unseen realms were intimately intertwined, where every element of nature possessed a living essence, and where harmony with the environment was not merely an ecological principle but a sacred imperative. This chapter explores the depths of Aeta spirituality, revealing a rich tapestry of beliefs, practices, and a deep reverence for the natural world that shaped every aspect of their existence. Animistic worldview, spirits in nature. The Aeta cosmology is fundamentally animistic, reflecting a worldview where spirits, or anitos, inhabit virtually every aspect of the natural world. These spirits can reside in towering trees, ancient rocks, flowing rivers, whispering winds, and even specific animals. Unlike many Western theological systems, there is no rigid hierarchy of deities or a distant, abstract God. Instead, the spiritual realm is populated by a pantheon of benevolent and malevolent spirits, often localized to specific places or natural phenomena. At the apex of this spiritual universe, some Aeta groups acknowledge a supreme being or creator spirit, often referred to by names like Apo Namoyari in Zambales and Pampanga Aeta traditions, Gugurang or Kadaklan, who is believed to oversee creation and maintain cosmic order. However, much of daily spiritual life revolves around interacting with the myriad nature spirits, whose favor could bring bountiful harvests, successful hunts, good health, or, if angered, illness and misfortune. This belief system fostered an intrinsic reverence for nature, as the Aeta understood that their survival depended on respecting the spiritual inhabitants of their environment. Every act, from gathering food to building shelter, was undertaken with an awareness of these unseen presences, ensuring that resource utilization was intertwined with spiritual protocols and sustainable practices. Shamans and spiritual healers, mediators of the sacred. Central to the mediation between the human and spirit worlds are the Aeta shamans and spiritual healers, known by various local terms such as Manganito, Mandudawak, or Maganito. These individuals are not only conduits to the spirit realm but also custodians of ancestral knowledge and healing practices. They possess the unique ability to communicate with spirits, interpret omens, and diagnose the spiritual causes of illness or misfortune. Through trance, chanting, and ritual offerings, shamans seek to appease offended spirits, retrieve lost souls, or solicit blessings for the community. Their role extends beyond healing. They often act as spiritual advisors, guardians of tribal traditions, and leaders in communal ceremonies. Spiritual healers, distinct yet often overlapping with shamans, possess extensive knowledge of medicinal plants and herbs, combining herbal remedies with spiritual interventions to treat ailments. Their practices are holistic, addressing both the physical symptoms and the spiritual imbalances believed to cause illness. The respect accorded to these spiritual leaders underscores the Aeta's deep understanding that well-being is not just a matter of the body, but of the spirit's harmony with the environment and the ancestral realm. Rituals and ceremonies, marking life's journey. Rituals punctuate the Aeta's life cycle and agricultural calendar, marking significant transitions and seeking spiritual favor. Birth rituals often involve ceremonies to welcome the new life, protect the infant from malevolent spirits, and seek blessings for health and prosperity. These might include protective amulets or specific prayers offered by the shaman. Death rituals are elaborate and deeply respectful, reflecting a belief in the continuation of the spirit after physical demise. Mourning periods, ceremonial burials, and offerings to the deceased are common, aimed at ensuring the peaceful transition of the spirit to the afterlife and preventing it from lingering to cause harm. Marriage rituals symbolize the union of two individuals and the merging of families, often involving specific customs of courtship, parental negotiation, and ceremonial feasts that solidify social bonds. These ceremonies frequently incorporate spiritual blessings for fertility and harmony within the new family unit. Harvest rituals are critically important, reflecting their reliance on foraging and, for some groups, subsistence farming. These ceremonies, often involving offerings of the first fruits or game, are performed to give thanks to the spirits for their bounty and to ensure continued prosperity in future seasons. These rites reinforce the Aeta's intimate connection to their environment and their gratitude for its provisions. Festivals and sacred sites, communal expressions of faith. Beyond specific life cycle rituals, the Aeta also observe various festivals and sacred sites that reinforce their spiritual worldview and communal identity. While not celebrated with the grand scale of modern national holidays, these gatherings are deeply meaningful events that bring communities together for spiritual renewal, communal feasting, and the sharing of oral traditions. These might include post-harvest celebrations, ceremonies for successful hunts, or specific rituals to avert natural calamities. Sacred sites are often specific natural landmarks, an ancient tree, a particular rock formation, a hidden cave, or a pristine waterfall believed to be imbued with powerful spiritual energy or to be the dwelling places of important spirits. These sites are treated with utmost reverence, and access to them may be restricted or require specific protocols. They serve as tangible links to the spiritual realm and to ancestral memory, acting as natural temples where offerings are made and ceremonies are conducted. For the Aeta, their world is alive with spirits, and every mountain, forest, and river is a testament to the profound spiritual harmony they strive to maintain. Their animistic beliefs are not merely superstitions. They are a sophisticated framework for understanding their place in the cosmos, guiding their interactions with nature, and ensuring the continuity of their people. Chapter 6. Forest Keepers, Survival and Sustainability. For generations, the Aeta have lived as masters of their environment, their very existence inextricably linked to the health and bounty of the Philippine forests, rivers, and coastal areas. Far from being passive inhabitants, they have served as active stewards, developing sophisticated knowledge and practices that allowed them not only to survive, but to thrive in harmony with nature. This chapter delves into the intricate web of their traditional lifeways, highlighting their ingenious methods of subsistence, their profound botanical wisdom, and the inherent environmental ethics that shape their relationship with the land. Subsistence strategies: foraging, hunting, and fishing. At the heart of Aeta survival lie their highly developed practices of foraging, hunting, and fishing. Foraging is paramount, providing a steady and diverse supply of food. Their intimate knowledge of the forest allows them to identify and gather a vast array of wild edibles. Various species of wild yams, ubi, tigbi, starchy roots, wild fruits like katman, lipote, and different kinds of berries and leafy vegetables. They are also adept at collecting honey from wild beehives, a prized commodity for both sustenance and trade. This deep botanical expertise extends to identifying plants that can be processed for specific uses, such as fibrous plants for weaving or bark for medicinal purposes. Hunting complements foraging, providing essential protein. Aeta hunters are renowned for their tracking skills and their profound understanding of animal behavior. They traditionally pursue wild pigs, deer, monkeys, and various birds, often using ingenious methods that minimize waste and respect the animal. Their hunting is never indiscriminate. It is a calculated activity aimed at meeting immediate needs rather than accumulation. Fishing, particularly for Aeta groups inhabiting riverine or coastal areas, is another crucial component of their diet. They employ a variety of traditional techniques, including the use of hand nets, spears, fishing weirs made from bamboo, and even natural fish poisons derived from specific plants that stun fish without rendering them inedible. These diverse methods of food acquisition demonstrate not just resilience, but a nuanced adaptation to the varied ecosystems of their ancestral domains. Indigenous medicinal knowledge, the forest pharmacy. Beyond sustenance, the Aeta possess an encyclopedic medicinal knowledge of native plants and herbs, a living pharmacopoeia passed down through generations. Shamans and traditional healers, as discussed in the previous chapter, are often the primary custodians of this vital wisdom, but many community members possess significant understanding. They know which leaves can staunch bleeding, which roots can reduce fever, which barks can alleviate pain, and which concoctions can treat various ailments from snake bites to stomach disorders. This knowledge is not merely about identifying plants. It involves understanding their precise preparation, dosage, and application, often coupled with spiritual rituals. For example, specific leaves might be crushed and applied as a poultice, while certain barks might be boiled to create a medicinal tea. This traditional medical system, honed over millennia through observation and trial and error, provides effective healthcare using locally available resources, highlighting a sophisticated understanding of biochemistry long before modern science. This indigenous medicine remains a crucial aspect of Aeta well-being, often preferred over, or used in conjunction with, modern medical interventions, especially in remote areas where access to clinics is limited. Tools, weapons, and traps. Ingenuity from nature. The ingenuity of the Aeta is also evident in their tools, weapons, and traps, all meticulously crafted from local materials harvested sustainably from their environment. Their tools for daily living include sharpened bamboo knives, sturdy digging sticks for foraging roots, and simple pestles and mortars for preparing food. For hunting, they utilize bows and arrows, often tipped with naturally occurring poisons to increase efficacy. The bowstrings are typically made from plant fibers, and the arrowheads from sharpened bamboo, or sometimes metal, acquired through trade. Spears, sometimes fire-hardened bamboo or tipped with iron, are also common for hunting larger game. For fishing, they fashion harpoons, various types of nets from woven plant fibers, and intricate bamboo fish traps that are designed to capture fish passively. Beyond weapons, they are expert trap makers, constructing cunning snares from vines and branches that are highly effective for catching small to medium-sized animals without unnecessary harm to the ecosystem. These tools are not mass-produced. Each is carefully made, reflecting a deep respect for the materials and the skill of the artisan. Their design is often elegant in its simplicity, perfectly suited to the task at hand, and demonstrating a profound practical understanding of physics and engineering. Resource management and environmental ethics, sustainable living. Underlying all these practices is a deeply ingrained resource management and environmental ethics. They aid to operate on principles of sustainability that Western societies are only now beginning to fully appreciate. Their subsistence methods are characterized by non-extractive practices. They take only what they need, leaving enough for regeneration. Hunting is often selective, avoiding pregnant animals or juveniles, and gathering practices ensure that root systems or parent plants are not destroyed. They understand the concept of fallow periods for foraging grounds, allowing areas to recover before returning to them. Their animistic beliefs, as discussed in the previous chapter, reinforce this ethic. The spirits of the forest must be respected, and overexploitation is not only economically unwise but spiritually perilous. Taboos exist against wasting resources or harming certain animals unnecessarily. Traditional governance systems often include elders or spiritual leaders, who make decisions about resource use, ensuring communal well-being and long-term ecological balance. For the Aeta, the environment is not a separate entity to be conquered or owned. It is an extension of themselves, a living, breathing provider that demands reverence and responsible stewardship. Their ancient ways of survival embody a powerful lesson for the modern world, that true prosperity lies not in dominating nature, but in living as its careful, discerning, and grateful keepers. Chapter 7. The Circle of Life, Family and Social Structure. The survival and resilience of the Aeta as a people are deeply rooted in the strength and fluidity of their social organization. Beyond their profound connection to the land and their spiritual beliefs, it is the intricate web of family ties, the clear delineation of roles, and the communal approach to life's challenges that have allowed them to persist through millennia. This chapter explores the fundamental building blocks of each society, from the bonds of kinship to the methods by which harmony and justice are maintained within their communities, revealing a sophisticated social order adapted to their traditional hunter-gatherer existence. At the heart of Aeta society are kinship systems and clan networks, which form the primary units of social organization. While specific structures can vary between different Aeta groups, the nuclear family typically serves as the immediate household, often embedded within a larger extended family unit that includes grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins. These extended families frequently live in close proximity, forming a band or a small settlement. Beyond these immediate familial ties, broader clan networks exist, often based on shared ancestry, dialect, or traditional foraging territories. These networks are crucial for mutual support, resource sharing, and collective decision-making. Reciprocity and communalism are central tenets. Individuals are expected to contribute to the group's welfare, and in turn, are assured of support in times of need. While formal leadership might be less hierarchical than in settled agricultural societies, respected elders and skilled hunters often hold significant influence, guiding communal activities and mediating disputes. The strength of these kinship and clan bonds ensures collective survival, allowing groups to disperse and reunite according to resource availability while maintaining strong social cohesion. Within these familial and communal structures, gender roles and responsibilities are generally complementary and highly valued, rather than rigidly hierarchical. Traditionally, Aeta society exhibits a remarkable degree of egalitarianism between men and women, reflecting the necessities of a hunter-gatherer lifestyle where the contributions of both genders are equally vital for survival. Men typically engage in hunting larger game, making weapons, and some forms of heavy labor. Women are primarily responsible for foraging wild plants, gathering firewood and water, preparing food, and caring for children. However, these roles are often fluid and adaptable. Women may participate in smaller game hunting or fishing, and men may assist in childcare or foraging. Both genders possess extensive knowledge of the forest, though their specializations differ. Women are often the primary custodians of botanical and medicinal knowledge related to plants, while men are masters of tracking and animal behavior. Crucially, women often hold significant spiritual and social influence, with female shamans being common and highly respected figures. Decision-making within the family and community often involves both men and women, underscoring a balance of power and a recognition of each other's indispensable contributions. Marriage customs and child-rearing practices reflect the practicalities and values of Aeta life. Marriages are typically exogamous, meaning individuals marry outside their immediate kin group, fostering alliances and strengthening broader clan networks. While arranged marriages might occur, especially in more traditional communities, mutual attraction and consent are often highly valued. Courtship rituals vary, but might involve gift-giving, shared tasks, or periods of cohabitation before formalizing the union. Marriage itself is often marked by simple ceremonies, communal feasts, and the exchange of small gifts, symbolizing the new bond between families. Divorce, while not common, is generally permissible and handled with communal mediation, recognizing that societal harmony is paramount. Child-rearing is a communal responsibility. Children are cherished and nurtured not just by their parents, but by the entire extended family and community. From a very young age, children learn survival skills, traditional knowledge, and social etiquette through observation and direct participation. Play is an important part of learning, mimicking adult activities like hunting or foraging. Discipline is often gentle, emphasizing teaching and communal guidance rather than harsh punishment, fostering self-reliance, respect for elders, and a strong sense of belonging. The absence of strict age grades in some groups means children transition into adult responsibilities organically as they develop the necessary skills. Maintaining harmony within the community is vital, and Aeta societies have developed effective systems for conflict resolution and traditional justice. Given their relatively small and interdependent communities, maintaining social cohesion is prioritized, and disputes are typically resolved through communal discussion and mediation rather than adversarial legal processes. Elders, respected community leaders, or shamans often serve as mediators, listening to both sides of a dispute and guiding the parties towards a mutually acceptable solution. The focus is often on restoring harmony and repairing relationships rather than meting out punitive punishment. Offenses such as theft, disputes over resources, or interpersonal conflicts are addressed directly within the community. Serious transgressions might lead to temporary ostracization or, in rare cases, permanent expulsion, but the emphasis is usually on reconciliation and reintegration. There are often traditional laws or unwritten codes of conduct that dictate appropriate behavior, rooted in shared values of reciprocity, respect for elders, and communal responsibility. These traditional justice systems are highly effective within their context, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of human psychology and group dynamics, and reinforcing the idea that collective well-being transcends individual grievances. The Aeta's social structure, therefore, is not merely a framework for organization. It is a living embodiment of their values, ensuring the continuity of their culture and the harmonious perpetuation of the circle of life. Chapter 8. Shelter, Dress, and Art. The Aeta's intimate relationship with their environment is nowhere more visible than in their ingenious approaches to shelter, their practical yet symbolic forms of dress, and the rich array of their artistic expressions. These cultural elements are not merely functional, they are deeply imbued with meaning, reflecting their adaptation to the tropical climate, their access to natural materials, and their profound connection to their ancestral heritage. This chapter explores how the Aeta have crafted their living spaces, adorned their bodies, and expressed their creativity, showcasing their resourcefulness and unique aesthetic sensibilities. Traditional Aeta housing ranges from temporary forest shelters to more semi-permanent structures, depending on the group's level of nomadism and their specific environment. The most recognized form of indigenous Philippine dwelling, the Bahay Kubo, a stilt house made of bamboo and nipa palm, also finds its variants among some Aeta communities, especially those who have adopted a more settled lifestyle or live closer to lowland areas. These structures, elevated on stilts to protect against floods, animals, and allow for air circulation, are designed for the tropical climate. They typically feature a single, open living space, with elevated sleeping platforms and often a small cooking area. For Aeta groups who remain more nomadic or semi-nomadic, forest shelters are more common. These are often much simpler, temporary lean-tos or small huts, constructed quickly from readily available materials. They might consist of a basic framework of branches, covered with large leaves, palm fronds, or bark, providing immediate protection from rain and sun. These shelters are easily erected and dismantled, reflecting their need for mobility within their traditional hunting and gathering territories. The choice of dwelling highlights their adaptability, a fixed abode for settled life, a transient one for a life on the move, both perfectly suited to their needs. The materials used in construction techniques for Aeta shelters are a testament to their deep knowledge of their natural surroundings. The primary materials are invariably sourced directly from the forest: bamboo for sturdy posts, flooring, and walling, nipa palm fronds, or other large leaves like those from wild banana plants for roofing and walls, providing excellent insulation and waterproofing, and various types of vines and rattan for lashing and binding, eliminating the need for nails. Construction techniques are remarkably simple yet effective, relying on lashing and interlocking methods. Bamboo poles are cut to size and notched to fit together, then securely bound with strong vines. Nipa fronds are often woven or sewn onto bamboo frames to create panels for walls and roofs. The process is communal, with families or kin groups working together, reflecting the cooperative spirit that underpins Aeta society. The simplicity of their dwellings belies their effectiveness, showcasing sustainable building practices that leave minimal environmental footprint and are perfectly attuned to the local climate. In terms of clothing and body adornments, the Aeta traditionally adopted forms that were both practical for their environment and rich in cultural significance. Historically, clothing was minimal, often consisting of loincloths for men and simple wraps or skirts for women, typically made from processed bark cloth or woven plant fibers. In some areas, buri palm leaves were woven into intricate patterns to create these garments. As they interacted with lowland populations, fabrics like cotton or denim, acquired through trade, became more common. However, it is in their body adornments that a deeper layer of cultural expression emerges. Beadwork from seeds, shells, or traded glass beads is common, fashioned into necklaces, bracelets, and anklets, often with symbolic colors or patterns. Plant materials like flowers, leaves, and feathers are also used for temporary adornment, especially during ceremonies or festivals. Body scarification, once widely practiced, involves creating raised patterns on the skin by cutting and irritating the dermis, often for aesthetic purposes, to mark rites of passage or to signify bravery. These patterns are unique to different Aeta groups and individuals, serving as a form of personal and communal identity. The artistic expression of the Aeta is vibrant and diverse, extending beyond adornment to encompass various crafts and, most notably, tattooing and music. Tattooing holds immense cultural significance among many Aeta groups, functioning as both a form of beauty and a historical record etched onto the skin. The patterns, often geometric or abstract, vary by region and tribal affiliation. They can signify achievements, social status, spiritual beliefs, or serve as protective talismans. The process is traditionally painful, using natural pigments and sharpened tools like thorns or slivers of bamboo, highlighting the resilience and commitment of the individual. Musical instruments are crafted from readily available natural materials, creating unique sounds that are integral to their rituals, celebrations, and daily life. These include various types of flutes made from bamboo, often played during leisure or courtship, bamboo guitars or lutes with strings made from plant fibers, and various percussion instruments like drums made from animal hide or bamboo resonators. Singing, chanting, and dancing are often integral parts of their musical performances, embodying stories, traditions, and spiritual connection. Finally, their crafts showcase their practical artistry. Beyond tools and shelters, Aeta create finely woven baskets, mats, and containers from bamboo, rattan, and other fibers, demonstrating intricate weaving patterns. Their mastery of knot tying and lashing is also an art form in itself, crucial for everything from building to making traps. While their art may often serve a utilitarian purpose, its careful execution, natural aesthetics, and symbolic depth reveal a profound creative spirit, underscoring that for the Aeta, life itself is a canvas for expression. Chapter 9. Stories of the Ancestors, Oral Traditions. In a world before written script, where history was not confined to pages but resided within the collective memory, the Aeta safeguarded their heritage through the potent art of storytelling. Their oral traditions are not merely quaint anecdotes. They are the living archives of a people, repositories of their cosmology, their values, their history, and their understanding of the world. These narratives, passed down with meticulous care across countless generations, form the very fabric of their cultural identity, serving as an enduring form of literacy that has connected them to their ancestors and guided their way of life. At the heart of Aeta, oral tradition are the myths of creation and origin, which explain the genesis of the world, humanity, and their own people. These stories often vary subtly between different Aeta groups, yet they share common themes of natural forces, primordial beings, and the emergence of life from a formless void. For instance, some Aeta narratives speak of a supreme being, or a powerful Anito, spirit, who shaped the mountains, carved the rivers, and brought forth the first humans from elements of nature, such as bamboo, clay, or a specific tree. These myths not only provide a cosmological framework for understanding their place in the universe, but also embed their spiritual connection to the land directly into their foundational beliefs. They often explain the origins of specific natural phenomena, cultural practices, or even the distinctive physical features of the Aeta themselves, linking the present directly to the sacred past. These origin stories are not just historical accounts, they are spiritual truths that inform their reverence for nature and their sense of belonging. Beyond the grand narratives of creation, animal tales and moral fables constitute a significant portion of Aeta oral traditions, serving as vital pedagogical tools. These stories feature a rich cast of animal characters, monkeys, wild pigs, birds, and insects, who exhibit human-like traits and dilemmas. Through their actions, both wise and foolish, these animals illustrate fundamental moral lessons, ethical principles, and practical knowledge about the natural world. A tale about a cunning monkey might teach about resourcefulness, while a story of a lazy wild pig might warn against idleness. These fables instill values such as cooperation, honesty, respect for elders, the importance of sharing, and the consequences of greed or deceit. They also subtly transmit ecological knowledge, like the habits of certain animals, the dangers of particular plants, or the appropriate times for hunting and foraging. Children grow up immersed in these narratives, internalizing their lessons in a culturally relevant and engaging manner, ensuring that the wisdom of the community is passed down in an accessible and memorable form. Aeta oral traditions also encompass powerful heroic narratives and ancestral epics, which celebrate the deeds of legendary figures and chronicle significant events in their collective memory. These are often longer, more intricate stories that recount the adventures of culture heroes who overcame challenges, defended their people, or established important customs and territories. Such narratives might describe epic hunts, migrations to new lands, encounters with powerful spirits, or conflicts with rival groups. While not always strictly historical in the modern sense, these epics embody the values of bravery, perseverance, loyalty, and ingenuity that are highly esteemed within Aeta society. They serve to reinforce communal identity, provide role models for younger generations, and connect the living to a revered lineage of ancestors. These stories are a testament to their long and often challenging history, providing a narrative framework for understanding their struggles, triumphs, and the enduring spirit of their people. They are a form of historical record, albeit one that prioritizes communal memory and cultural meaning over precise chronology. The very survival of these rich oral traditions hinges upon the crucial role of elders in the act of storytelling and cultural preservation. Elders are the living libraries of the Aeta community, holding vast repositories of knowledge, not just stories, but also practical skills, medicinal recipes, social customs, and spiritual wisdom. They are the primary storytellers, meticulously recounting narratives during communal gatherings, around the fire at night, or during educational moments. The transmission is often rigorous. Young Aeta learn by listening, observing, and eventually, by retelling the stories themselves, ensuring fidelity to the original narratives while allowing for subtle adaptations to new contexts. Storytelling is a dynamic and interactive process, not a passive recitation. It involves voice modulation, gestures, and engaging the audience, fostering a strong bond between the teller and the listeners. This continuous process of oral transmission is the bedrock of Aeta cultural preservation. In a world where external pressures constantly threaten their traditions, the commitment of elders to share these stories and the willingness of younger generations to listen and learn is paramount. It is through these spoken words that the Aeta continually reaffirm who they are, where they come from, and the enduring values that define them, ensuring that the voices of their ancestors continue to echo through the mountains, forests, and communities of the Philippines. Chapter 10. Contact and Conflict. The Austronesian Arrival. For tens of thousands of years, the ancestors of the Aeta were the sole human inhabitants of the Philippine archipelago, shaping their lives in profound harmony with the untouched environment. This ancient rhythm, however, was destined to change dramatically with the arrival of a new wave of migrants, the Austronesian-speaking peoples. Their coming marked a pivotal turning point in Philippine prehistory, initiating an era of complex interactions that would forever alter the demographic, cultural, and social landscape of the islands, setting the stage for the Aeta's long and often challenging struggle for survival. The Austronesian expansion into the Philippines began approximately 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, a massive maritime migration originating from Taiwan and spreading rapidly across island Southeast Asia and eventually into the vast reaches of the Pacific. Unlike the earlier hunter-gatherer migrations, the Austronesians brought with them a revolutionary set of technologies and practices: sophisticated outrigger canoes capable of long-distance voyaging, advanced agricultural techniques, including rice cultivation, pottery making, weaving, and a more complex social organization. Their arrival was not a single, sudden event, but a series of waves over centuries, as different groups branched off and settled various islands. These agriculturalists gradually populated the fertile lowlands and coastal areas, which were ideal for their farming methods and provided access to trade routes. Their superior technology and greater numbers would inevitably lead to profound shifts in the existing human landscape. The initial interactions between the Aeta and these incoming Austronesians were multifaceted, encompassing both peaceful coexistence and violent conflict, as well as gradual displacement. Evidence suggests that early encounters likely involved a mixture of trade. The Aeta, with their unparalleled knowledge of forest products, such as rattan, beeswax, honey, medicinal plants, and various resins, possessed valuable commodities that the newly arrived agriculturalists desired. In exchange, the Austronesians offered metal tools, pottery, and agricultural produce. This symbiotic relationship would have benefited both groups initially. However, as Austronesian populations grew and their need for land expanded, displacement of the Aeta from prime lowland territories became increasingly common. The Aeta, being hunter-gatherers with a deep reliance on extensive foraging grounds, found their traditional territories shrinking. Their preference for non-confrontational strategies, coupled with their smaller numbers and different technological base, often meant they retreated into the more rugged interior mountains and dense forests, areas less suitable for Austronesian agriculture. This movement was not always forced. Sometimes it was a strategic choice to avoid conflict and maintain their traditional lifeways. Yet conflict undoubtedly occurred, driven by competition over resources and territory. Oral traditions of some Aeta groups speak of ancient battles and skirmishes, reflecting a memory of these early clashes that profoundly shaped their settlement patterns and relationships with their new neighbors. Despite the pressures, these interactions also led to varying degrees of cultural blending and isolation. Over centuries, continuous contact resulted in significant cultural exchange. The Aeta adopted certain Austronesian technologies, such as improved farming techniques, metal tools, and some elements of material culture. As discussed in Chapter 4, many Aeta groups also underwent language shift, gradually adopting Austronesian languages, though retaining unique dialects and, perhaps, remnants of older, pre-Austronesian linguistic substrates. This process of blending was not uniform. Some Aeta communities maintained greater isolation, particularly those in the deepest recesses of the mountains or in more remote areas. This isolation allowed them to preserve more of their original cultural practices, spiritual beliefs, and subsistence methods, sometimes even maintaining ancient social structures. The degree of blending versus isolation often depended on geographical factors, the specific Aeta group's historical choices, and the intensity of Austronesian settlement in their vicinity. This created a mosaic of Aeta communities, some highly acculturated, others maintaining a fierce independence and cultural distinctiveness. Crucially, the Austronesian arrival paved the way for the rise of coastal and lowland civilizations across the archipelago. The introduction of intensive agriculture, particularly wet rice cultivation, allowed for greater food surpluses, supporting larger and more sedentary populations. This led to the development of more complex social hierarchies, specialized crafts, and organized trade networks. Settlements grew into villages and eventually into proto-states or barangays, though not in the modern sense, that engaged in long-distance maritime trade with China, other Southeast Asian kingdoms, and beyond. These emerging lowland civilizations, with their burgeoning populations and increasing political power, gradually became the dominant cultural force in the islands. The Aeta, by contrast, largely remained outside these burgeoning centers of power. While they continued to engage in trade with the lowlanders, they maintained their distinct identities as forest dwellers and hunter-gatherers. Their world, once unbounded, became increasingly defined by the boundaries of their retreating ancestral domains, setting a precedent for their relationship with subsequent colonial powers, and, indeed, the modern Philippine state. The arrival of the Austronesians thus marks the beginning of a complex and enduring dynamic between the Aeta and the majority population, a dynamic characterized by both shared histories and enduring cultural divides. Chapter 11. Spanish Colonization and Aeta Resistance. The arrival of the Austronesians centuries earlier had already initiated a profound shift in the Aeta's world, gradually pushing them into the interior uplands. However, the dawn of the 16th century brought a new, even more formidable force that would dramatically intensify the pressures on indigenous life, the Spanish colonial power. Beginning with Ferdinand Magellan's landing in 1521 and solidifying with the establishment of Manila in 1571, the Spanish presence profoundly reshaped the archipelago, forever altering the trajectory of the Aeta, who found themselves once again defending their way of life against an encroaching foreign power. The Spanish arrival in 1521 and their subsequent consolidation of power had an immediate and far-reaching impact on the upland tribes, including the Aeta. The Spanish strategy centered on establishing control over coastal and lowland areas, where they could exploit rich agricultural lands, establish trade routes, and evangelize the more settled Austronesian populations. For the Aeta, this meant a further constriction of their traditional territories. The Spanish introduced new concepts of land ownership, replacing indigenous communal access with a system of private property and land grants to loyal subjects and religious orders. This directly threatened the Aeta's nomadic or semi-nomadic existence, which relied on vast, open foraging grounds. Furthermore, the Spanish demand for resources, particularly timber for shipbuilding and agricultural produce for tribute, led to increased exploitation of forest areas, encroaching on Aeta hunting grounds. The imposition of a centralized colonial administration and the constant drive for civilization and conversion viewed the Aeta's independent, forest-dwelling lifestyle as a challenge to order, marking them as targets for subjugation. A key component of the Spanish colonial project was the establishment of Jesuit and Augustinian missions in Aeta territories. Driven by a fervent desire to spread Catholicism, religious orders ventured into the interior, seeking to convert the upland tribes. Missionaries saw the Aeta as heathens living in ignorance, and believed it was their divine duty to bring them into the Christian fold. The Jesuits, known for their adaptable and often more academic approach, along with the Augustinians, who were among the earliest missionaries in the Philippines, established reducciones, or resettlement programs. These were aimed at gathering scattered indigenous populations into planned settlements around a church and a town plaza, making them easier to evangelize, control, and tax. These missions often represented the first sustained direct contact between Aeta communities and the Spanish colonial apparatus, bringing with them not only religious doctrines, but also new social structures, economic demands, and diseases, to which the Aeta had no immunity. The missions inevitably led to forced Christianization and resettlement. For the Aeta, this meant a radical disruption of their traditional lifeways. Their animistic beliefs, which were deeply intertwined with their spiritual connection to the land and their ancestral spirits, were demonized as paganism. Christian conversion was often presented as the path to salvation and civilization, accompanied by pressure to abandon their traditional clothing, rituals, and semi-nomadic existence. Resettlement into reducciones involved abandoning ancestral hunting and foraging grounds for a sedentary agricultural life, a fundamental shift that directly threatened their food security and cultural identity. While some Aeta might have willingly joined missions due to famine, intertribal conflict, or the promise of new tools and resources, many resisted fiercely. Those who refused to be converted or resettled were often labeled remontados, those who went back to the mountains, or cimarrones, wild, untamed, and subjected to military expeditions aimed at their forced subjugation, leading to violence and further displacement. Despite overwhelming odds, the history of Aeta interaction with the Spanish is also filled with remarkable stories of rebellion and resilience. Their deep knowledge of the mountainous terrain, their ability to move quickly through dense forests, and their decentralized social structure made them incredibly difficult for the Spanish to fully conquer. Unlike the more settled lowland communities that could be controlled through established political hierarchies, the Aeta's fluidity allowed them to evade direct Spanish authority for centuries. There are accounts of Aeta raiding lowland settlements that encroached on their lands or attacked their people. While these were not large-scale organized rebellions in the manner of lowland revolts, they were acts of resistance against colonial imposition. Their refusal to abandon their ancestral beliefs and their persistent adherence to their traditional ways, even under duress, stands as a profound act of defiance. The mountains and forests became not just their homes, but their bastions of freedom, where they could continue to practice their spirituality, speak their languages, and live according to their ancient customs, even as the Spanish sought to impose a new order. The enduring presence of the Aeta, distinct and unconquered in spirit, is a testament to this centuries-long struggle and their unwavering commitment to their unique identity. Chapter 12. American Rule and New Pressures. The close of the 19th century heralded a new colonial power in the Philippines, replacing the Spanish with the Americans following the Spanish-American War and the Philippine-American War. While the stated intentions of the American colonizers differed from those of the Spanish, emphasizing benevolent assimilation and democratic ideals, their policies continued to exert immense pressure on the Aeta and other indigenous groups. This new era brought a different set of challenges, subtly but significantly reshaping Aeta life through the introduction of public education, the intensification of resource extraction, and the institutionalization of racial hierarchies. One of the cornerstones of American colonial policy was the establishment of public education, envisioned as a key component of their civilizing mission. The Americans believed that widespread education, taught in English and based on Western curricula, would uplift the Filipino populace and prepare them for self-governance. For the Aeta, this represented a new form of cultural encroachment. While the Spanish focused primarily on religious conversion, the Americans aimed to assimilate indigenous peoples into a westernized, modern society through schooling. Schools were established, and efforts were made to encourage Aeta children to attend. The curriculum, however, largely ignored traditional Aeta knowledge systems, languages, and cultural practices, inadvertently undermining their indigenous identity. While some Aeta might have gained access to literacy and new skills, many viewed these schools with suspicion, seeing them as alien institutions that drew their children away from essential survival skills learned in the forest. The civilizing mission, despite its benevolent rhetoric, often overlooked the rich, complex cultures already in place, pushing a singular vision of progress that failed to acknowledge or respect indigenous ways of knowing and living. The American period also saw an intensified exploitation of the Philippines' natural resources, leading to increased logging, mining, and land grabs that directly impacted Aeta ancestral domains. Unlike the Spanish, who focused on agriculture and trade, the Americans recognized the vast economic potential of the island's timber and mineral wealth. Large-scale logging concessions were granted to American companies, leading to the rapid deforestation of areas that were traditional hunting and foraging grounds for the Aeta. Similarly, mining operations expanded, often without regard for indigenous land rights or environmental impact. The concept of land grabs became more formalized, as new land laws, based on American property systems, were introduced. These laws often failed to recognize indigenous customary land tenure, which held land communally and did not rely on formal titles. Consequently, vast tracts of ancestral Aeta lands were declared public lands, or unused, making them vulnerable to acquisition by powerful lowland Filipinos, American corporations, or the government itself for agricultural expansion or infrastructure projects. This systematic dispossession further marginalized the Aeta, pushing them deeper into increasingly fragmented and less resource-rich territories. Adding another layer of complexity was the American system of census classification and racial hierarchy. In their efforts to categorize and govern the diverse populations of the Philippines, the Americans introduced racial classifications that reinforced existing biases and created new ones. The Aeta, along with other indigenous groups, were often classified as non-Christian tribes or wild tribes, distinct from the civilized Christian Filipinos. This categorization, while intended for administrative purposes, inadvertently entrenched a racial hierarchy that placed the Aeta at the lower end, contributing to their social and economic disadvantage. This classification also made them subjects of ethnographic study, often displayed in human zoos at international expositions like the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904. Such displays, while framed as educational, dehumanized the Aeta, exoticizing their appearance in traditional ways for public spectacle, further cementing stereotypes of them as primitive relics rather than dynamic contemporary peoples. Ultimately, U.S. policies profoundly reshaped life, forcing adaptation and intensifying existing pressures. The push for sedentary life through schooling and land titling clashed with their traditional semi-nomadic existence. The destruction of forests for commercial gain directly threatened their subsistence strategies. The racial categorization further marginalized them within the emerging Philippine nation-state. While some Aeta found new opportunities through limited engagement with the colonial economy or education, the overall effect was a significant erosion of their autonomy, cultural integrity, and control over their ancestral lands. The American period solidified a pattern of external forces dictating the terms of Aeta existence, setting the stage for ongoing struggles over land rights, identity, and equitable participation in the modernizing nation. The seeds of poverty, discrimination, and dependence that would plague many Aeta communities in later decades were, in many ways, sown during this era. Chapter 13: World War II and Aeta Wartime Experience. The mid-20th century plunged the world into its most devastating conflict, and the Philippines, strategically vital for its location, found itself at the heart of the Pacific War. From 1941 to 1945, the Japanese occupation imposed immense suffering and disruption across the archipelago. While much of the historical narrative focuses on urban centers and major battles, the remote rural areas and their indigenous inhabitants, including the Aeta, experienced the war in unique and often brutal ways. This chapter sheds light on the Aeta's wartime experience, revealing how the global conflict penetrated their isolated communities, their surprising role in the resistance, and the enduring scars left by years of violence and displacement. The Japanese occupation had a profound and often immediate effect on rural areas, including the traditional territories of the Aeta. As the Japanese Imperial Army established control, their presence extended beyond major towns and cities, seeking to secure resources and suppress any resistance. For the Aeta, this meant an end to whatever semblance of isolation they still maintained. Japanese patrols often ventured into their ancestral lands in search of food, intelligence, or to pursue Filipino and American guerrillas. The Aeta's traditional subsistence methods were disrupted as foraging grounds became battlefields or supply routes. Food became scarce, and communities faced constant fear of encounters with soldiers from either side. The Japanese military's harsh policies, including forced labor, confiscation of resources, and brutal reprisals against suspected collaborators, affected everyone, even those deep in the wilderness. The war brought widespread violence, disease, and starvation to populations already living on the margins, forcing the Aeta to adapt their survival strategies to an unprecedented degree of danger and uncertainty. Despite their often perceived isolation, many Aeta communities played a crucial role in the guerrilla resistance and intelligence efforts against the Japanese. Their unparalleled knowledge of the terrain, the hidden trails, secret springs, and camouflage shelters within the dense forests and mountains became invaluable to the Filipino and American guerrilla forces operating in Luzon. Aeta guides led resistance fighters through treacherous paths, helping them evade Japanese patrols, set up ambushes, and transport supplies. Their keen observation skills, honed by generations of hunting and foraging, made them excellent sources of intelligence, able to track enemy movements and report on troop sizes and dispositions. Some Aeta men and even women actively participated in skirmishes, providing support to guerrilla units or engaging in small-scale sabotage. Their deep understanding of the local ecology also meant they could provide food and medicinal plants to the often starving resistance fighters. While their contributions are often overlooked in official histories, their active involvement underscored their patriotism and their deep commitment to defending their ancestral lands, and, by extension, the broader Philippines, from foreign invaders. The war inevitably led to widespread refugee life for the Aeta. As fighting intensified and areas became unsafe, many communities were forced to abandon their homes and traditional hunting grounds, seeking refuge in deeper, more remote parts of the forest or moving between temporary shelters. This displacement was physically grueling and culturally disruptive. Families were separated, traditional social structures were strained, and access to food and clean water became critical challenges. The Aeta, highly adaptable, utilized their skills to survive in these harsh conditions, building temporary shelters, finding new foraging areas, and evading both Japanese forces and, at times, desperate lowland refugees. The experience of being a refugee, however, left deep scars. It reinforced a sense of vulnerability and precariousness, undermining the stability of their traditional existence and exposing them to external dangers on an unprecedented scale. Many endured sickness, malnutrition, and the trauma of witnessing violence or losing loved ones. The most poignant accounts of this period come from the oral accounts of Aeta elders, who lived through the war and carry its memories. These personal testimonies are invaluable, offering a nuanced and often harrowing perspective that is absent from formal historical records. Elders recount terrifying encounters with Japanese soldiers, the desperate search for food, the courage of their people in assisting guerrillas, and the profound sense of loss for those who perished. They speak of hiding in caves for days, witnessing aerial bombardments, and learning to distinguish between the sounds of friendly and enemy patrols. These narratives often emphasize themes of resilience, communal support, and the enduring importance of their connection to the land as a source of refuge and sustenance. While often told in hushed tones, these stories serve as a powerful reminder of the global conflict's reach even into the most remote corners of the world, and the extraordinary human capacity for endurance in the face of unimaginable adversity. The wartime experience left an indelible mark on the Aeta, shaping their collective memory and influencing their relationship with the wider society in the decades that followed. Chapter 14. Mount Pinatubo, the eruption that changed everything. For millennia, Mount Pinatubo stood as a sacred and silent sentinel over the ancestral lands of numerous Aeta communities in Zambales and Pampanga, a benevolent provider of forest resources and a spiritual sanctuary. Yet in June 1991, this seemingly dormant volcano awoke with a fury that would forever alter the landscape, dislodge tens of thousands of people, and irrevocably change the trajectory of the Aeta's history. This catastrophic event, while a global geological phenomenon, was for the Aeta a profound cultural and existential crisis, a sudden and brutal rupture from their ancient way of life. The chronology of the 1991 eruption began with initial seismic activity in April, escalating into a series of increasingly powerful explosions throughout June. After weeks of warnings and smaller eruptions, the mountain unleashed its most cataclysmic event on June 15, 1991, coinciding with the arrival of Typhoon Yunya. This fortuitous timing amplified the disaster. The heavy rains mixed with the volcanic ash to form destructive lahar flows, torrents of volcanic debris, mud, and water that cascaded down the volcano's slopes, burying everything in their path. The eruption ejected an immense column of ash and aerosols into the atmosphere, which circled the globe and caused a temporary drop in global temperatures. The environmental devastation was immense and unprecedented. Vast tracts of forest were obliterated by pyroclastic flows and ashfall. Rivers were choked and altered, agricultural lands buried under meters of lahar, and entire villages erased from the map. The fertile landscapes that had sustained the Aeta for countless generations were transformed into barren, moon-like terrains, rendering their traditional hunting and foraging grounds completely unusable. Faced with this impending geological disaster, the monumental task of evacuation, relocation, and establishing refugee camps began. Philippine authorities, with assistance from the U.S. military, which operated Clark Air Base nearby, itself severely impacted, initiated mass evacuations of communities within the danger zones. For the Aeta, this meant leaving behind their ancestral homes, sacred sites, and all the familiar landmarks of their world. They were transported to lowland refugee camps, often in unfamiliar environments, sometimes alongside the very lowland Filipinos with whom they had historically maintained a cautious distance. These camps, while necessary for immediate survival, were often crowded, unsanitary, and culturally alienating. Life in these temporary shelters was a stark contrast to their traditional existence of freedom in the forest. They faced dependency on aid, limited mobility, and the psychological trauma of displacement. The loss of privacy, the unfamiliar diets, and exposure to new diseases further compounded their suffering. For many Aeta, these camps became their new, uncertain reality for months, even years. The most profound and lasting impact of the Pinatubo eruption on the Aeta was the loss of ancestral land and cultural identity. The vast swaths of land that were buried by lahar or rendered uninhabitable were not just physical territories. They were living landscapes imbued with spiritual significance, ancestral memory, and the very essence of Aeta culture. Hunting grounds, sacred burial sites, sources of medicinal plants, and traditional pathways, all were obliterated. This physical detachment from their traditional domain meant a severing of their spiritual connection to the land and a fundamental disruption of their subsistence economy. Many Aeta, now landless and dependent on aid, found their traditional skills of hunting, foraging, and forest management rendered useless. The forced proximity to lowland culture and refugee camps and later resettlement sites led to accelerated cultural erosion, as traditional practices, languages, and social structures came under immense pressure to assimilate or disappear. For a people whose identity was so intrinsically linked to their ancestral environment, this loss was a devastating blow, creating a generation grappling with a sense of profound disorientation and loss. In the aftermath of the eruption, a massive effort involving government aid, NGO involvement, and community response was mobilized. The Philippine government, through agencies like the Department of Social Welfare and Development, provided emergency relief and initiated resettlement programs, constructing permanent housing in designated areas. However, these relocation sites were often far from their original homes, lacked adequate resources, or placed Aeta communities in areas with pre-existing land disputes. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs, both local and international, played a critical role in providing humanitarian assistance, developing sustainable livelihood projects, and advocating for Aeta rights. These organizations often work directly with Aeta leaders to understand their needs and support community-led initiatives. The community response of the Aeta themselves was one of remarkable resilience and adaptability. Despite the trauma, Aeta leaders emerged to organize their people, negotiate with aid agencies and the government, and articulate their needs. They sought to reclaim their agency, adapting their traditional knowledge to new environments or finding new means of livelihood. Some even found surprising economic opportunities in the Lahar, collecting sand and gravel, though often under exploitative conditions. While the eruption of Mount Pinatubo was an undeniable catastrophe that radically reshaped their lives, it also catalyzed a renewed push for indigenous rights and a heightened awareness, both internally and externally, of the urgent need to protect the Aeta's ancestral domain and cultural heritage. The post-Pinatubo era would see the Aeta embarking on new struggles, but also finding new pathways for asserting their identity and securing their future. Chapter 15. The Fight for Land and Recognition. The 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo, as explored in the previous chapter, dramatically exposed the Aeta's precarious land tenure and deepened the existing crisis of their ancestral domains. Yet, the devastation also paradoxically ignited a renewed and intensified struggle for land rights and official recognition that continues to this day. This chapter delves into the heart of this contemporary battle, examining the historical roots of land dispossession, the landmark legislation designed to protect indigenous rights, the courageous legal and organizational efforts of the Aeta, and the ongoing challenges they face in securing their rightful place in the modern Philippine nation. The history of the Aeta, post-colonial contact, has been marked by relentless land dispossession and the challenge of asserting ancestral domain claims. Centuries of colonial rule, first Spanish then American, introduced Western concepts of private property and land titling that fundamentally clashed with the Aeta's customary communal land tenure. Land deemed unoccupied, forest land or public domain by the government, was systematically granted to corporations, lowland settlers, or declared for development projects, despite being the ancestral hunting grounds, sacred sites, and homes of Aeta communities for millennia. This process accelerated throughout the 20th century, leading to significant encroachment, deforestation, and the erosion of Aeta control over their traditional territories. After the Pinatubo eruption, many Aeta found themselves landless, relocated to unfamiliar sites, and unable to return to their now-buried ancestral lands. The concept of ancestral domain became a rallying cry, representing not just a piece of land, but the spiritual, cultural, and economic lifeline of their people. In a landmark effort to address historical injustices against indigenous peoples, the Philippine government enacted the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, IPRA, of 1997. This groundbreaking legislation was revolutionary for its time, recognizing the rights of indigenous cultural communities/indigenous peoples, ICCs, IPs, to their ancestral domains and lands, self-governance, social justice, and cultural integrity. IPRA established the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, NCIP, to implement its provisions, notably the process of obtaining certificates of ancestral domain title, CADTs, and certificates of ancestral land title, CALTs. For the Aeta, IPRA represented a beacon of hope, offering a legal pathway to formally secure the lands that were rightfully theirs by ancestral claim. It mandated free and prior informed consent, FPIC, for any development project within ancestral domains, granting indigenous communities a powerful voice in decisions affecting their lands and resources. Armed with the provisions of IPRA, the Aeta embarked on numerous legal battles and intensified community organizing efforts. Aeta leaders, often with the support of non-governmental organizations, NGOs, legal aid groups, and human rights advocates, initiated the lengthy and arduous process of filing CADT applications. This involved extensive ethnographic research, mapping traditional territories, and gathering testimonies from elders to establish proof of ancestral occupation. Communities held numerous consultations, conducted workshops on IPRA, and formed local people's organizations to empower themselves and collectively advocate for their rights. Notable examples include Aeta communities in Zambales and Pampanga, tirelessly pursuing their CADT claims over lands impacted by Pinatubo, often coming into conflict with powerful corporate interests or lowland claimants. These legal struggles were, and continue to be, challenging, requiring immense perseverance, financial resources, and a deep understanding of complex legal frameworks, often against entrenched interests accustomed to disregarding indigenous rights. Despite the promise of IPRA and the tireless efforts of Aeta communities, the continuing land struggles and environmental exploitation remain significant challenges. The implementation of IPRA has been fraught with difficulties, including bureaucratic hurdles, corruption, conflicting land claims from non-IPs, and the slow processing of CADTs. Many Aeta's CADT applications are still pending decades after the law's enactment. Furthermore, even with titles, Aeta ancestral domains continue to face threats from large-scale development projects, such as mining operations, dam constructions, geothermal plants, and tourism ventures. Powerful corporations and even government agencies sometimes circumvent or disregard FPIC requirements, leading to continued environmental degradation and the displacement of Aeta communities. Illegal logging and land encroachment by individual settlers also persist, exacerbating the pressure on dwindling forest resources. For the Aeta, the fight for land is not merely a legal battle. It is a daily struggle for survival, cultural preservation, and the right to self-determination. Their resilience in the face of these ongoing challenges underscores their unwavering commitment to their ancestral heritage and their determination to secure a just and sustainable future for generations to come.